Welcome to the start of a new horror reading vlog. This is something different I'm trying out for my channel. I'd love to know your feedback as you watch this. Is this something you'd like me to do more? In this video, I'm going to be talking about a series of popular horror books. Some of them are vintage, some of them are newer. And included in this video, I think a lot of you will be interested to know that I found not one, but two really messed up books. And one of them has become a new favorite of mine. The other one is a close second. It definitely has favorite potential. I kind of have to think about it a little bit more before I film the final summary at the end of this video. But needless to say, if you're looking for some new books to put on your TBR, if you looking for something different, something you haven't read yet, hopefully I have some surprises for you here and some great recommendations at the end of the day. All that being said, let's get started. Morning. So last night I finished the first book for this reading vlog, and that is Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. This is a story that follows four horror authors that go off to this supposedly haunted house to spend the night and to be interviewed. Each of the authors follows a sort of archetype for a particular kind of horror author. So one feels to be representative of someone like Stephen King, another one is more of like a YA Christian author, and together they go to this house, and as you expect, things happen. This is one that I've been wanting to read for a long time. I've had it on previous horror TBRs, but I would start it and it wouldn't really grab my attention and I would put it down. Now I want to reread it, honestly, partially because of the fact that this book is set in Halloween, and I'm working on a video actually for next year that I want to include this book in. So I pushed myself to get through it, and when I put on this TBR, I was actually surprised because I've heard nothing but praise about this book. But this time around, I actually saw, while some people liked it, there was almost more negative comments about this book. A lot of people called it sexist, as well as saying that it dealt with a lot of fat-phobic language. And I always try to go into my books relatively judgment-free, or really make a decision for myself rather than just following along with what other people are saying. So I went to the book, and a few things I'll say. One is the fact that I found the characters are very flat, which I know is a criticism of the book, and it's kind of on purpose. As I mentioned, they're really meant to be archetypes rather than fully fleshed out human beings. So they're kind of supposed to be similar to certain other authors, and because of that, it kind of made them a bit cartoony. I think that was done on purpose. There's a female character in the story that is really unlikable. She's just kind of a terrible human being. And I believe that that is where a lot of these sexist comments have come from. I personally don't mind a really unlikable, hateful female character, because I always think we can have male villains. And weirdly enough, with equality, I want to see female villains too. I want to see ugly female characters. I don't mind that per se. I think there is a bit of questioning about whether or not the author thought this character was cool, or thought that she was more likable than she was, perhaps. But I personally found less issue there, but I'm also not always the best sensitivity reader, so keep that in mind. I am someone, given my own history, someone who really does get bothered by more fat-phobic language, and that was more bothersome within the story just because there is one character who is significantly overweight, and there are other characters that are calling them fat throughout the book, which in a way is not necessarily that the book or the author is being fat-phobic, but rather the characters are. However, the character themselves has a lot of internal dialogue that is never really fought against, where they're really fat-shaming themselves, and just a lot of like comments and limitations of saying that they did this to them. I don't know. It's just, there was stuff that I can see why people calling it fat phobic, and I would put that same label on it. I don't think this book does any favors to someone who is overweight or trying to make peace with their body or things like that. I just think that this book is just a little bit thoughtless and kind of using someone's size as an easy way to make punches at them. So I think the author could have did something else. Anywho, this is a long talk about things surrounding the book. As for the book itself, I'd say the story of the haunted house itself was good. Like, I think the actual background of the house, the history, everything that happened there was quite interesting. And I'm saying this as someone who doesn't always love haunted house stories. They're not my favorite subgenre of horror, as I've said many times before. So I actually was pleasantly surprised by that. I think there were some good pieces to it. I think the premise in general was really smart. Did I have an amazing time reading it? No, mostly the fact that I felt the characters again were flat, and while it was intentional, it didn't make for a very enjoyable reading experience. I am someone more and more who reads looking for either great writing or character development and other pieces, and this one felt like a just straight up action story of playing it through that didn't have the levels or complexity that I wanted. I really wanted the characters' flaws to be better tied into what happened to them, and it just felt a little bit surface level, I'll be honest. Anyway, I'm trying to keep this all spoiler free, but give you a little bit more thoughts given that this is a vlog. Love to know your thoughts, good or bad, with this book. Do you agree with the criticisms? Do you think that they're unfounded? And all that being said, I do need to continue. At the moment, I'm reading The Amulet by Michael McDowell, as well as The Nest by, oh, I forget the author's name. I want to call him Gregory Douglas. I'm probably wrong. I'm always wrong with names of authors in these videos, but I'm going to continue on with those two. I'll be honest, I'm liking but not loving them, which is telling me that I really need to get a book in this vlog that I'm going to absolutely love. And I think that's going to be Flowers in the Attic, but I'm going to finish up these two books first before getting into that one. So I'll keep you posted there. All right, so quick update here. Hopefully I'm able to record this before I get interrupted. We're about to watch Pokemon because that is my kid's newest obsession. Anywho, as for books, so after filming that last clip, I ended up getting the urge to pick up Elizabeth by Ken Greenhall. I know it's a pen name for female vintage horror author, and that one I ended up really enjoying. I often have said in past videos when I was first getting into thrillers and horror and all of that, that there were some authors, like modern authors like Gillian Flynn, who were known for writing really dark, unlikable female characters who do terrible things. And it's always pleasantly surprising to actually find out that these stories have been written in the past. Perhaps they're just not as well known, or at least not as well known to me, but we follow the character Elizabeth, who right at the beginning of the story you find out that she has done horrible things, and we follow her throughout it. It's incredibly short, it's novella length. I'm kind of reluctant to give away too much plot, but I ended up liking it overall, and I do think that I'll read more by this author. I've read Childgrave by them before and did enjoy that one, so I will definitely continue to check out whatever backlist is available to me. The other book that I finished was The Amulet by Michael McDowell, and this is a story of a small town where we have this woman who is grieving after this accident that's happened. There ends up being a necklace that's passed around, and then these grisly violent events start to happen, and of course there's a question of if the necklace is all behind it. This is one that had a slower start for me. I wasn't honestly sure I was really enjoying it or getting into it, but I ended up enjoying it by the end, or at least appreciating it. It's very much a story of Southern Gothic horror. It's about Americana, small town life, things that are not necessarily things that I personally understand, but appreciate that it's done very well. So I thought the characters were well developed. This book has a lot of interesting and important commentary talking about racial divides at this time period when the book is set. And I think that the book is doing a lot of great things. I really do understand the love for Michael McDowell. He's not personally an author who gets 5 stars for me just based off of the subjective feeling of like my enjoyment reading the book, but I very much think that he is an author who deserves his place in the horror archives of authors that you definitely should check out and hopefully love even more than I did. So I'm glad I read this book. I've read a few other books by him before, and this is definitely my favorite of the ones I've read so far. Again, it's just one that I don't talk about a lot on my channel, only because I appreciate his books a little bit more than I love them, and I definitely think it's a me problem, not necessarily the book. The other book that I attempted to read was The Nest by Douglas Gregory. Okay. All right, it looks like it's time to watch Pokemon. I'm gonna have to talk to you later. Hey, hopefully it's not too loud. I'm hiding in the kitchen from the Pokemon video to finish up this update because I think I got interrupted part way through. And so if I haven't talked about it yet, I also tried to read The Nest by Gregory Douglas, I believe it is, and this is a book that I thought was about spiders. It's not, and ended up being more about other creatures. And so this is one where I started it, but I didn't actually finish it, and I'm reluctant to even mention it in this vlog because I do not typically talk about books that I DNF. I did a video quite recently talking about how I read faster by DNFing a lot of books, and a couple people in the comments misconstrued the fact that if I'm talking about negative books in my wrap-ups, they said, well, you're just talking about books that you DNF'd. And I do only talk about books that I finish, and I do DNF books I don't like because I feel a bit of an obligation as a reviewer if I get books from review, or simply just have a book that I feel is important enough to talk about in a negative way, maybe to bounce out some overwhelming positive opinions, things like that. And so I do finish books I don't like, but I also DNF a lot of books that you never hear about on my channel. This is one where I absolutely could finish it, I could give a proper review, but I'm really trying to focus more on my reading enjoyment when it comes to horror rather than feeling the pressure to review every single book for my audience, because I definitely got myself burned out a couple years ago where I decided I had to read every single book and discovered that there are a lot of pockets of horror that just aren't to my taste. And this is the case here. I just found the book to be a little bit boring. I found myself either scrolling my phone about 5 minutes after I started reading it, or picking up a video game and just wanting to do anything else but reading, which again is a sign that I need to move on to another book. So I'm not saying the book is bad. I hear that it has some really gory parts to it. It's supposed to be a really good creature feature. Wasn't feeling it, and this fall I just really want to be enjoying horror again. I've been craving horror, wanting to get back into it as a genre, because I definitely took a little bit of a break over the summer and wasn't doing as much reviewing as I currently or previously have done. So the goal here is to read the good stuff and focus on that, and I will get back to you when I have more reviews. Hey, so I got my lovely basic lunch here, eggs, cheese, and tomatoes on bread. And what I'm really excited for this lunch break is that this just arrived in the mail. So this is 3 books from the Murdle collection, and I was really excited. Now this might shock the world, but I'm perhaps the only person who never played Wordle. And I actually know very little about Murdle. I just know that it's puzzles, like it's puzzle books. And I was someone as a kid, I loved puzzle books. So I'm incredibly excited to get to have these. So they send volume 1, volume 2, my flowers are gonna block in the way, and then volume 3 here. And they also sent pencils, which needs sharpening, but I can't find my pencil sharpener, so I'm gonna use this lovely pencil. Can you see that on camera? It's like, definitely looks chewed on. Anyway, so this is my first time checking out these books. I was purposely waiting until I could film it to crack into these. And so here it shows the difficulty. So we have elementary, occult, medium, hard-boiled, and impossible. And you basically go through and there's different things that you have to deduce, different clues, and then it goes through it all. And like I said, this is literally the first time I'm going through this book. So I'm going to try it out, kind of read through it, see if I can figure it out. I can see if my puzzling skills with this is better than with Professor Layton. And yeah, I'm really excited. I think I'll put an audiobook while I do this and eat some lunch. And yeah, I'll keep you posted. Hey again, quick updates. So I did the first puzzle in Murdle. First off, I had to pause my audiobook because I realized that I couldn't read instructions and listen at the same time. So that was a bad idea. I think in the future I'll do this while listening to music or something like that, because you definitely don't want to have two audio sources going at the same time. And besides that, I got started with the puzzle, realized I had no clue what I was doing. I don't think this is actually what Wordle is. I think Wordle's something else. But what this is these process of elimination puzzles. So I had to go back to the instructions like a child and go through it all. And once I got started, I actually remembered I did these as a kid. I remember doing these like in, cars, and you kind of would have activity books. And so it completely brought me back, just like that childhood nostalgia I needed right now. And so it took me a minute. I actually ended up pausing the camera because I was like, this is taking too much camera footage to go through. But sure enough, I was able to actually puzzle it out and figure out who done it with what and where. So if anything, it's kind of using more like the process of elimination, deduction that's used in the board game Clue, which I also love. So this is definitely something I'd recommend to anyone who shares my love of kind of the logic deduction that comes with mysteries and all of that. But this has just been so much fun and I want to keep doing it, but I have to get back to work. So I will come back. And again, I got all 3 volumes. I don't know actually how much is out. So this is going to keep me busy for a while. I am very excited. Yeah, so 100 puzzles per book or something like that. And yeah, this is going to take me a while. I'm very excited for this. Thank you so much to St. Martin's who sent this. This is a great gift if you know anyone who just loves puzzles as much as I do. So this has been a lot of fun and I want to keep going, but work. Hey, so I'm just about to take a lunch break from work here, and besides food, I'm really craving playing some Persona 5. I just need a good mental break. It's been a busy morning with lots of meetings here, and I'm excited to get back into it. It's a game that is a JRPG. I have a friend that loves this game, and so I'm finally checking it out. It has turn-based combat, which is great because I'm terrible at combat, and so I want to be able to take my time, think about it, and I'm playing on the second easiest mode. I'm not playing on story mode because my husband insisted that I actually had to play the game and not just have the game play itself. But yeah, it's a JRPG that I think is very story-based. It's kind of cutesy, but also really dark and has a lot of like dark undertones if you actually pay attention to the messaging and themes surrounding the whole video game. And because it's supposed to be this like 100-hour game, I find myself being really intimidated to play it. I almost was kind of nervous to get into it just because I don't tend to play a lot of video games, or at least I didn't until I decided to make this vlog. And that's the fact that, again, I tend to choose reading over playing video games and pretty much all other hobbies. And so before this month, I was probably only playing about an hour of video games a week. And so if the game takes 100 hours and I'm playing maybe an hour a week, I realize at that rate, I'd be playing this game for 2 years if I keep up with that progress. So I'm really trying to push myself to get more gameplay hours in. I'm enjoying it, don't get me wrong, but I'm not used to going into such a big game that I'm going to be playing for a long period of time. And I've heard amazing things about it. I want to see it through, but I need to keep that momentum going. So if you have any really long games that you love or that you find intimidating, I'd love to hear that down below. But let's finish up work and get into it. Okay, so I'm popping in here with another update. I'm so excited to have a gushing review in here because a couple of the books I liked and appreciated but didn't necessarily love so far. And the book I want to talk about now is Lost Souls by Poppy Z. Brite. This is the same author who wrote some other really popular books. The book I planned to read when I first made my fall TBR was Drawing Blood, and several people in the comments recommended that it's not the best place to start with their work. Not necessarily the book is terrible, but it's not their best. So several people recommended checking out Exquisite Corpse, which I still plan to do, especially after really enjoying this book, but that book had a longer hold on it, while this book was readily available through my e-library. By the way, the reason that I'm showing a lot of covers in this video rather than holding up physical books is just that I did not plan my fall TBR plans. I just didn't make my plans early enough, essentially, and it takes weeks to get physical books in from my library, and there was a lot of holds on there. So almost exclusively I'm going to be doing ebooks with a couple of audiobooks like the Amulet thrown into this video. And so what this book is about is it follows a group of vampires or individuals that are traveling around and driving and living their lives. It's one of these books that is much more about the characters than the actual plot of what is happening. This book in a lot of ways reminds me of things like First Light by Liz Caron, a book that I loved earlier this year. This is another very character-driven, character-heavy book where it's really about these lost souls. Lost Souls is technically the name of a band that exists within this world that is made up by these vampires. But of course, it's really meant to be a double meaning within the story because you're following those that have had their lives totally changed by their vampirism and also are just struggling to fit into society and wondering about and in a place where they don't necessarily have meaning or a place to go or life goals, that you're very much in this holding pattern and very much that lost souls idea. And so I ended up really loving this one. I'll say that the writing is well done. I wouldn't necessarily call it literary, but it definitely has a quality to it that feels more complex, more dense than something of the typical kind of creature feature stories that I'm typically picking up. So very much enjoy this one. I think that it's weird and it's incredibly messed up. I really should start. I always bury the lead, but this book has some huge content warnings. As often with vampire fiction, there's a lot of sexual content built into that, and a lot of it seems like really questionable in terms of the consent. There's some relationships, for lack of a better word, that isn't really the best word to describe, where there's just inappropriate sexual acts happening in the book. There's one scene involving Jesse that just boggled my mind that is in here, and it definitely makes it the kind of book where I want to recommend this book because I had a great time reading it, but I also don't want to recommend this book, and I'm also almost embarrassed to admit on camera how much I like this book, given the fact that there is some content in this book that other people read and be absolutely disgusted not only by the book, but the fact that other people like myself enjoy or like it. Enjoy is kind of the strange word for it. But this is a book, again, that just has these complex characters. I just wanted to spend time with them. I'd say, again, it's kind of a plot light book. It's, again, much more about characters that are really standing still in their life. So if you're looking for a big narrative progression, a big plot, or a place that they are going to, I didn't necessarily find that. Instead, really what I found is a story that just really explored vampirism as a way, I believe, to really explore those that are seen as otherly in the world, those that don't necessarily fit in. Sorry, I gotta cut it up here quick, but need to say, really enjoyed this one. I don't even know if I'm adding anything of value at this point, but do recommend this one. I gotta go before my kid turns off my camera on me. Oh my. All right. Hey, so I just have a couple chapters left of The Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. I already have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to wait till it's all done. I think I know where this is going and I want to see if I'm right. And I will just finish up here and come back with some thoughts, so stay tuned. So I'm officially done Flowers in the Attic, and I think I enjoyed it. It wasn't what I expected, but I also went into it really blind, so I don't quite know what I was expecting it to be. I don't know if it's the best way to go in blind because it's a book that kind of meanders. And because people told me the book was really messed up, I kept going down different avenues expecting the book to be messed up in ways that it wasn't. For example, right in either the first or second chapter, the father is going into the bedroom of the one child, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is why this book is messed up. And I expected to go in certain directions, but thankfully it didn't. And it definitely did get to those messed up parts, but they were not the parts I expected or the situations I was expecting them to be. Look up your trigger warnings if you have them, because this book definitely has some scenes that are really bothersome depending on what is the things that are personal to you. So weirdly enough, I did end up, as I mentioned a moment ago, kind of guess what was going on with parts of the book, and it has to do with the fact that this book reminded me, or at least some of the plot points reminded me of a nonfiction memoir I'd read. And there just happens to be a random coincidence because the memoir I'm thinking of was written well after this one, but it happened to have some of the same plot points, and so I was able to put together a couple guesses that turned out to be right. And again, there are parts of this book that completely blindsided me with some of the weirdness. And it's strangely a cozy book at the beginning, and then it gets darker and darker and just kind of feels misleading. I could definitely see myself, or I think a lot of people have had the experience where they might have picked up this book when they were younger and not really known what they were getting themselves into, which is perhaps why this book has such a reputation. Is it kind of seems like the kind of book that I thought you just give to a young person. I thought it was kind of a young adult horror-ish book in the vein of something like Carolyn B. Cooney, and it's definitely not. So I'll admit I'll have to come back and put my thoughts in better order. But overall, I like this one. I'm a fan of a book that makes me feel something, even if those feelings are being kind of queasy and bothered and upset. But I think that this one has some good suspense. It's slow, and kind of what I love about a horror that's a little bit older is that there's almost like a tone difference to it, where I feel like with modern horror there's all this expectation for everything to ramp up into a big climactic event, and sometimes the dread and the suspense and the unknown and the questioning of what's happening is almost scarier for me, or makes me feel more uneasy, than an event where you know there's going to be like a big bad thing coming out and it's a bit more action driven. Don't do as much for me, and I think that's often why I struggle with some of the new releases these days. Anyway, I like this book, but I'm also afraid to say that I like this book because this book is something else. And again, I'll come back with final thoughts on all the books I talked about once I get my thoughts together a bit better. All right, so that's it for this reading vlog. I would love to have your feedback on if you would like me to do more videos like this. If so, what type of content do you think is interesting? And if you prefer straight up wrap-ups without the extra life bits in there, that's okay too. I really am looking for feedback. These videos take a lot more time to film and edit. I have so much respect for vloggers. I love watching vlogs, but I'm definitely realizing the time that goes into creating those type of videos. So anyway, as for the books themselves, let me just rattle through a bit of a summary. So with Kill Creek, I really enjoyed the premise of that one. I actually liked the haunted house aspects more than I thought, but a lot of the character work, while it was intentional to make them stereotypes or archetypes, made for a less enjoyable experience because they were just so stilted and flat. And definitely some of the parts with the fat phobia language just is not something I'm looking to read, so that did spoil the book a tiny bit for me, just given my own personal history there. From there, I ended up enjoying The Amulet, or at least appreciating it, by Michael McDowell. I think that I can see this, in my mind, seems to be some of the best of Southern Gothic Americana horror. I think it's just simply not something that I have a personal connection to, and while I don't only need to read stories about people that are like me, I just find that the characters, the setting, all of that is kind of at a distance to me, but I very much appreciate it. I thought the writing was great. I thought the character work was well done and complex, and there's a lot of good things going on. I really see why Michael McDowell is a lot of people's favorite authors. I just don't think he's going to be a favorite for me based off of the books I've read so far, but really glad I read this one. Probably my favorite by him. I did skip over The Nest, so again, I don't provide any review for DNFs. I just wanted to mention it for the sake of this video to give you an idea of what my reading often looks like off camera and the books that typically never get discussed further. I also talked about Elizabeth by Ken Greenhall, a really short horror novella that surprised me because of the fact that it really deals with an unlikable character who is female, something that I feel like or thought previously was a newer trope to horror and thrillers, and really authors have been doing that for a long time. They just, perhaps books like this haven't been as popular or haven't really bubbled to the top of our collective memory. So if you're someone who likes those kind of stories in the vein of something like Gillian Flynn would write, I recommend checking it out, although keep in mind that given the age of the story, I'd say that it's a softer version of that. It doesn't quite have the same teeth or extremeness that more modern authors perhaps will go to, but definitely you can see the origins of that popular subgenre or type of story that I really love reading today in modern work. Then from there I went on to Lost Souls by Poppy Z. Brite, which is probably the biggest surprise of this video. I've actually tried to read this author maybe about 6-7 years ago, and I remember reading one of their books or starting one of these books and just finding the writing to be not necessarily to my taste. I remember being very slow paced, didn't have enough plot, and I ended up putting it down. And I'm glad I put it down then because I don't think I was a type of reader who would have enjoyed it. I've mentioned that my tastes have shifted substantially, and so while I don't know if I'd actually label this book as literary per se, it definitely has threads of that. Again, it's much more character driven. There isn't a lot of plot, but instead we follow these characters on their journey, on the road. And while it is a vampire story, it's a subtle piece, and it's more about how their vampirism has made them into others in society and how they're trying to cope, how they come together, get companionship from each other. Obviously, there's huge messed up things in here. If you have content warnings, look them up for yourself before checking out this book because there's some really messed up things that happened. I was not necessarily prepared for what I found in this book, but it was so good despite all the weirdness in it. It's really good, and I'm very excited to read more by this author. They're definitely going to go way up on the TBR because I think that they have a lot of potential to become a new favorite. And finally, the last book I read, I just talked about, and that is Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. And this is one where I went to this book very blind, which I think is an intriguing way to go about it, but also left me really wondering as I went through the book trying to figure out what it was all about. In the end, thinking back now that I've had a bit of space since originally filming that clip, I've come to really appreciate this book. I think it's doing a lot of things that I like to see in my stories. And I think that it has a lot of elements that are typically things I'm drawn to or plot points. There's some parts of the story that even after sitting on it for a while, I still don't fully understand why the author chose to bring in some weirdness. Once again, this book has some weird content warnings, some really messed up parts, and if that sounds up your alley, I definitely recommend checking out this book, but be prepared. Again, check for content warnings if that's an issue for you there, because it goes to some really strange places. But the ending, how it all came together, even though I was able to guess parts of it, it was still so interesting. I think it was just surprising. I often go into books that are a little bit older with certain expectations that they can't really go there, and was pleasantly surprised. Again, this book isn't that old relatively, but again, I think that it's doing things that modern books have done, which I always thought that modern books were doing for the first time, and that is not the case. So highly recommend this one to the right audience. It's weird. It takes a while to get going, but once it goes there, it definitely does. So that is it for this video here. I'd love to know the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself, and what are you reading this horror season? Because obviously Halloween is not here yet, so I will be doing more horror wrap-ups talking about the books I'll be reading leading up to October 31st. If you're new to my channel, I hope you do stick around. I do read horror not just in the fall, but actually all year. And if you want to stick around and subscribe, I appreciate that. You can also help me out with this video with a thumbs up, a comment down below, either let me know what you think of the vlog or just simply an emoji like a pumpkin to let me know you're here. And if you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.